Hey guys, BJ here, back with this week's Meta Snapshot, and things are definitely starting to settle down now during the Heirs of the Omen expansion, along with obviously the balance patch that we now got a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, let's dive into this week's meta. A few things have moved around. I'm going to focus mainly on the top 2 tiers and show you some decks that go with those as well. So without further ado, thanks for all the support as always, and let's dive on into this week's Meta Snapshot. All right, so guys, in a nutshell, to me, as of the 11th of October, I actually feel like this is a pretty fair representation of the meta right now. So as you can see, what I've done this week is I have kept Crest and Spell Boost in a tier of their own. I've played around with these in different weeks, and I kind of was like, well, is Loot Sword, is Mode, are they sort of tier 1 or are they 1.5? And in the end, without being, you know, if I'm really trying to make use of the tiers and without being too fancy with like tier 1.5 and all that sort of stuff, at the end of the day, I do think that Crest, Haven, and Spell Boost are just a cut above the rest. So, for example, what I've done this week is delved a little bit more into some of the mirror matches, some of the key matchups themselves between some of these top decks. And for example, Mode Abyss really struggles with Crest Haven. And to be honest with you, it often struggles with Spell Boost as well. It almost needs to play more like the mid-range, almost like a mid-range Abyss when it's playing against Spell Boost. To try and put pressure on, to try and get some speed, and obviously Spell Boost can brick, but if it gets its shenanigans off, then I think it's favoured in that match. And so I feel like Crest Haven is just pretty much good into absolutely everything at the minute. It really doesn't have any bad matchups. It certainly has matchups that it can lose, but I feel like that. And then also obviously Spell Boost just does the thing that no other deck does, right? It just breaks the game on turn 10 in a way that there's no other thing that compares to what you can do with Declimb. And so there are many matchups where Spell Boost, you know, if they couldn't do that, they would absolutely lose, right? They seem as though they're losing the whole way, and then they go off and do their major wombo combos and steal the victory from the jaws of defeat. So I feel like, to be honest, the Crest Haven and Spell Boost are in a class of their own, and so for me, they are tier 1. I do have Crest Haven as number 1 over Spell Boost, and I think that's because as the meta's evolved, there are a few decks that can beat down Spell Boost. You know, things like Storm Dragon do very well into Spell Boost. Even Puppet Portal now, if they draw the sort of double Orcus or Orcus Liam, they can end the game before the shenanigans go off. And Loot Sword as well, obviously, if it gets the right stuff, and we already know Combo Roach is good. So Spell Boost actually does have a few more problems into the current field, but again, it has that ability to steal victory from the jaws of defeat, and I think that still gives it an edge over the meta. So these are the top 2 decks for me. Now on to tier 2. As I say, I do think Mode Abyss is a great deck, but I do feel like it's a powerful deck, but it's kind of somewhat still fair. The mode payoff, which I think is really cool, the kind of quest that you go on to trigger mode 10 times, and then after that the deck gets silly because you get to essentially do additional modes for everything. Guys, I think this deck is I think that ability is great, but it's a bit slow, and that's okay. It's what makes this this build somewhat fair, you know, strong but fair. And honestly, Mode Abyss is kind of like where you want decks to be, I think, which is strong but fair. And so for me, I'm putting that at the top of tier 2, slightly above Loot Sword. I think Loot Sword, when Loot Sword goes off, it's absolutely devastating. Like, it can just burn your opponent down ridiculously. We'll look at this when we look at the decks, but I do think Loot Sword can be a little bit inconsistent, and I think Mode might be a little bit more consistent, and hence why I've got it above Loot Sword. Now, Puppet Portal's obviously burst onto the scenes. I actually think Puppet Portal is very, very good. It can struggle a little bit if it doesn't draw its Orcuses, and you know, some people are running Jerry, some aren't, but I think overall the power level of it is phenomenal. Like, you can basically burst your opponent down from 20 in 2 turns, which is pretty cool. Combo Roach is the boogeyman of the meta, as always. Great into Spell Boost, pretty good into any control deck actually, because it's a combo deck. And for those who don't know, combo decks are always good into control, because control wants to play slow. They want to just control the board. They're not very active in the board. And combo decks are like, great, we just want to draw combo pieces and then we go off and just burst you down. And that's exactly what Combo Roach does. It's still the hardest deck in the game to put to master. But it's definitely got a high power ceiling. Mid Abyss is actually potentially between that and Storm Dragon, maybe the easiest of the more powerful decks to play. I don't know. I think Puppet Portal's a bit easy as well, to be honest. But Mid Abyss is, what you're looking to do is almost traditional CCG stuff, right? Like just play on curve and overwhelm your opponent. Take control of the board early and then just beat down your opponent. Storm Dragon, very similar style of play to Mid Abyss. And so I think that's a pretty good representation of tier 2, right? It's not quite that those decks are just not quite on the level of Cresthaven and Spell Boost, but they are above everything else. Like in terms of their ability to win the game, close out, and consistency on ladder, I do feel like that's a pretty fair representation of tier 2. Now, the one, well, there's a couple of decks, but the probably the next two, OTK Dragon and Tempo Fairy. I was calling this Miracle Dragon. I like that because of Miracle Rogue from Hearthstone, but most of the community is knowing this more as OTK Dragon, so I've changed the name. But, the thing with the Miracle OTK Dragon deck is the top 2 Dragon players this week on the class rankings both ran a version of this, and they've got both versions of that deck. I can show you. I think this deck could well be in tier 2, but it's still early, and I feel like outside of Toby and Teddy, I've not seen enough evidence yet that this can kind of dominate. But it certainly is a contender. I have a feeling it might end up tier 2. With a high power level but a high skill ceiling. It has a very good match into Spell Boost, and it has a pretty good match into Cresthaven as well. And so for that reason alone, given that they're the tier 1 decks, I think the OTK Dragon is a great deck. However, when you're using it as a ladder deck, it can lose out to a lot of these other decks, right? It can get burst down by Storm Dragon and Mid Abyss and Puppet. So it's one of those decks where I think it's actually going to be pretty good in tournaments. I think if we had a tournament this weekend and we were targeting Cresthaven Spell Boost, it would be amazing. And I think it's very powerful at the very top of ladder, like at Grandmaster 3 level, or like at the once you've got sort of 2K or 1900 at least CR rating. I think it'd be really good because then you'll be coming up against more Cresthaven and Spell Boost. But actually in the slightly lower ranks, it'll actually struggle more on ladder because you'll be coming up against some of those matchups that I said are bad matchups. Now I think Tempo Fairy is another one where there might be an argument that it could be tier 2. I'm not sure it's quite got the closing out ability of those tier 2 decks. You look at Puppet, you look at Mid Abyss, Storm Dragon, they can really just beat you down in a couple of turns pretty harsh. I don't know that Tempo Fairy's quite got that. It's a bit more like chip damage, and I think it's a little bit more inconsistent. And then you've got a time, well, when do you pivot then into the Jerry game plan? And that might not be, that might not be a good idea. Like, for example, I don't know, against Spell Boost, if you go into the Jerry game plan later, you've probably run out of time. Spell Boost are just going to beat you down before you get to do anything. So I feel like that's the main reason why I've put it in tier 3 for now. Now, mid-range sword, I am going to be playing a little bit of this week. I found a deck list that I think is, went on an 18 win streak, high rankings. I'm going to definitely give this a go, because outside of that deck, I don't see lots of people playing it. But the fact that someone was able to do that does suggest that mid sword is still very viable. So I've got that in here. Aggro base again, classic ladder deck, right? It can, if you haven't got the heal, it can just win games, and I think it can steal games, and that's often a good thing on ladder, because your opponent queues into you, they see a base, they think you're going to be mode, they think you might be mid, they're going to mulligan for that, and if they get the mulligan wrong against aggro abyss, it can just be game over. Wardhaven, last week I talked about a deck called Hybrid Haven. I've kind of like just merged them together because I didn't want to have like two. They are slightly different decks, but they are making use of the Aether, and all the ward combos in there. So I think I'll encourage us to think about it as different versions of Wardhaven. But ultimately, it's still not a bad deck. It's still not a bad deck. It's very good into Combo Roach. I think it might be good into some of these Storm decks as well, by having multiple wards down. So Wardhaven could be low-key decent right now. Definitely go and give that a bit of a shot on ladder. This and let me know in the comments how you're getting on with it. Obviously, it's difficult because Cresthaven's the best deck in the game. So if you're playing Haven, it's like, why are you not playing the best deck in the game? I think that's the biggest problem Wardhaven's got at the minute. It's just the fact that it's not the best Haven deck. Simple as that, really. Zudia Control, again, very interesting. I think this deck is favored into Crest, and it has a decent shot against Spell Boost. I don't know if it's like overall kind of like a 50-50 matchup, because technically speaking, Spell Boost can go off on its combo on turn 10, whereas Izudia goes off on turn 11. So technically speaking, Spell Boost beats you to the punch. However, you know, if we were to play that match out like 50 times in a row, obviously Spell Boost aren't just going to get the perfect wombo combo 50 times in a row. So, whereas Azudia can be a bit more consistent. So I feel like overall it might be kind of close to a 50-50 matchup. Or no, maybe Spell Boost is slightly favored. Let me know again in the comments. I'd love to hear some thoughts and opinions on it. But again, the point is Azudia is really, really good into these decks that are trying to control. I do think it's dropped down a little bit though, because I do think if you look in that tier 2, there's a lot of like beat down decks in there, and I think Azudia Control is really having to lean heavily into its kind of heal game plan, and I just don't know if it can survive. And then in tier 4, go back and watch the video I made last week and in previous weeks. This is almost like this sort of meme tier. You'll see these decks on ladder for sure, because they're a lot of fun and they're interesting archetypes, and I think they need developing a little bit. But you've got the new the Disdain ramp, which is a bit more like a sort of mid-range build. You've got the Lashana Egg Portal, which is just a bit slow, but it's a different, interesting new way of playing. Rose Queen combo, where you play Rose Queen down and turn all of your one-cost units into spells, and then just do a one-turn kill. Do 21 damage from hand on turn 10. It's pretty fun. Stormhaven, I think, is also a fun way to play Haven, but again, why would you play it when you can play Cresthaven? And Artifact is, at this stage, becoming a bit of an artifact right from the beginning of the game in set 1, and it probably needs a little bit of love. It probably needs a little bit of help if we're going to see Artifact kind of really recompete again at the top of the meta. And then Fluctuation Rune's a very new archetype with the latest set, but again, it needs a little bit more support. So changing the costs of all your cards and then getting benefits for doing so. So let's, with that said, let's jump into look at specifically some of the top tier decks. I'm actually going to start at the top of tier 3 though, because I did say that I would share with you these two versions. So Toby, I did do a deck guide. If you want to go and check out the full video for that, please do. I had some absolutely amazing games on there, and it showed off different win cons, so it's a good one to go and watch. For sure, it's one of my favorites, I think. But this is Toby's latest version of his deck, and a few updates to boot. And yeah, it's a really cool deck. It's very similar to the other one I'm going to show you in a minute. But you know, he does run a single copy of Draconic Strike, which is interesting because it opens up some other player patterns. Like, for example, making Cocytus only cost 8, so you could play a cheaper Cocytus, an earlier Cocytus out, or making Jerrybane cost 2, and potentially getting a combo off with other cards, or just whatever you need, right? Like whatever you've got in your hand, just needing to play the AoE and make something else cheaper to fit. But ultimately, the deck is really, really good because you are looking for your ramp, and you're looking for your tablet in the early game. And then we're basically going to draw through, and you're either going to Cocytus pretty early because you've ramped into Cocytus, or you're going to get Fenny down. And then if you get Fenny down first, then you're probably going to get a Jerrybane and Cocytus one-turn kill, or at least 2-turn kills. You know, you play that off, and then the opponent's got to win next turn, otherwise they lose. But it's 1-turn kill if you've got draw like Tablet, or something like Golden Note Melody, or Greatness Ascended, right? And you'll just draw through the cards from Cocytus, and then you'll just win the game. It's really, really cool. I think White Scale Herald is a really underrated card. In many respects, the buff to Lu Feng is what it's actually low-key done is buffed all overflow cards. Any card that says if you're in overflow, well, now we're getting into overflow a good percentage more as a dragon player because everyone's now playing double Lu Feng and Dragon Sign. So overflow got a kind of, yeah, a bit of a sideward buff. And White Scale Herald is very, very good. One version of this is that they don't run the white scales, and instead they run, and they don't run the Phil Dows, and instead they run the ocean package, right? So they run the Neptunes and the 5-drops with the idea that you're going to evo your 5-drop to control the board on turn 5, but we don't need to in this version because we can do it for 2 with Phil Dow, right? So that's why we don't have that. And then equally, rather than playing Neptune for 7, we just play White Scale Herald, which is 4 or even 2 if it comes after a Fenny. So, but you can replace that package for the Ocean package if you prefer, you know, slightly beefier bodies, achieving the same output but with slightly beefier bodies. You can do it that way. Right, next up, I'm going to show you this version of it, the other version. Now, this is Teddy, and for those who don't know, Teddy is, I think, one of the best European CCG players, full stop. I believe he's German. I just remember him from Runeterra. Like, he used to be such a dominant tournament player, and already he's done really, really well in Shadowverse Opens. I think he made like the top 8 in 2 of the heats. He lost to one of the winners, so he's right there or thereabout. Like, really, really good player. He understands the game really well already, and he's doing some good deck building. This is his version. And I really like it, and one of the big things that he's added is Zell Wind Reader, which is just awesome because what this gives you is another combo 1-turn kill. So basically very similar to Teddy's version, but what we're doing here is if we draw Fenny, it's a question of Cocytus, right? So it's a question of, do we draw Fenny first? If we draw Fenny first, then we can go cheap Cocytus and we can go with the Jerrybane Cocytus combo. But if we draw Cocytus first, then we would play Cocytus. We'd go for the Cocytus game plan, and then what you do is you play the 6-drop so when you've got Cocytus deck, obviously you've got the 6-cost unit that does 10 storm damage, so that leaves you with 4. And so what you then do is you play the 1-drop that's a 13/13, and then you play a Zell Wind Reader, and then you Super Evo Zell Wind Reader, which gives Storm to the 13/13, and then you've basically got 23 damage to face. So it's a 1-turn kill from full health, and it's just another awesome combo. So again, what I like with Teddy's version is that you've kind of got that question all the time is, do you draw Cocytus first or do you draw Fenny first? And whichever way, it's like still a win-win situation. We've got triple tablet, so we're going to draw really consistently through the deck. It's just an awesomely powerful deck, but it has got a skill ceiling because obviously you've got to get there. You've got to get to those combos, and navigating it is the difference in the skill level. I'm doing all right with it. I've definitely not mastered it. I'm definitely not playing it obviously as well as Teddy or Toby yet, but I'm doing all right with it. I've got a positive win rate with it, but I think I'm still losing games where I'm making mistakes, so I definitely need more practice with it. So yeah, take those for a spin. Let me know in the comments which version you prefer. Like I said, both have hit #1 on the Dragon class rankings. Okie dokie, so let's work our way up through tier 2. So we've got Storm Dragon. So this version of Storm Dragon is something that I really like. I really like the one of the blade because we've got a number of pretty powerful Storm units in here. So always, whenever we've got that one extra play point floating, just have that ability to get an extra bit more damage on there is pretty good. But yeah, just really, really strong. You've got good early game. You've got the ramp built in. You've got the Jerrybane if you need to pivot the game plan, particularly if your opponent's got like lots of heal, or maybe if you're playing against something like Abyss or Sword and it's dead early, you could pivot into Jerry. Got the nice removal and heal between the Neptune, Caesar, Merman package, etc. And then it's just Storm, baby, Storm, right? Galmeo, Forte, Odin, obviously Gayu, if you Super Evo, gets 6 damage, 5 damage out of it. And then you've got the Genesis Dragon as a one-off just finisher. So yeah, really, really cool. I do think that this deck is pretty powerful and probably the easiest one to pick up and do well with out of the Dragoncraft class. Okay, next up, we've got Mid-Abyss. We went over this one last week, guys. Again, just very, very powerful units on curve. Mino's nice as a 2-drop because you get the skeleton that's a 0-cost skeleton, which you can play if Mino dies, and it can trade into 2/2s pretty well. But then if it gets to turn 4, it's got the enhance ability, right, where you can this thing actually gets Rush and Bane, so it becomes hard removal for 4. So nice bit of flexibility. I really like Mino actually in this deck. It's really grown on me. But it's just playing into Ghastly Soiree in the early game, into your sort of Wellers, into Supplicant, into Aragavi or Congruent of Entwining. You've got the Undead Soldier, which is really sticky, along with the Ghostly Soiree. And then things like Olivia can pick up on anything that's left on the board, as can Cerberus. And then really powerful turn 7 with Rule Knight and Odin, either filling the board or doing storm damage. And then a copy of Jinsetsu as well, just to kind of like round out the top of the curve. So yeah, I mean, overall, guys, I do think that this is a pretty straightforward deck, right? Like, if you don't want to mess around with the mode, this deck is just play followers on curve. 34 followers, only 6 spells in this deck. Yeah, it's probably the most simple of the powerful decks to pick up and play. A deck that's definitely not simple is Combo Roach. So this is the Combo Roach deck. We're looking to get that Godwood Staff down early, control the board. Obviously, Glade is a great way of recovering against aggro and drawing into our combo pieces. Lambert, Cairn, and Bale ultimately give us 0-cost cards in hand, and that allows us to combo out with Roach to make a big giant Roach and win the game. Puppets, a couple of versions actually with Puppets. There are the Jerry version and the non-Jerry version. I believe that this one did hit the #1 ranking on the Portalcraft class ratings, so I wanted to share this version with you. It has a couple of copies of Via Heartslayer. Quite nice, actually, because basically Via herself has Bane, so she can trade. She's really, really dangerous. Trading. One of the things I like about Bane, by the way, is if your opponent attacks you in their turn and kills it, they still suffer the Bane. So Bane's quite an underrated ability in a way. But the other thing is the Doll Slayer has actually got Ambush. What that means is you can put a 1/1 down, and then next turn you can Evo or Super Evo and get like, 3 to 4 damage, which, to be honest, with the amount that Orcus can do now, burst damage, sometimes that 3 to 4 chip damage can be enough to tip them into lethal range. So Via's pretty good. And also, sometimes the problem with this deck is you end up with loads of puppets in hand and nothing to do, and Via converts those puppets. So she's quite good for sort of like hand management or something like that. Yeah, it's a really good deck. Gilnelise obviously gives you another win con if the game goes really, really late. And you want to basically be mulliganing pretty hard for Orcus. It's why we've got 3 copies of Ruby as well, to try and course correct the hand, because it's just so important to find your Orcuses. And I think that the way that this is designed, it's fairly consistent. You've got UD drawing through the deck, you've got the Rubies putting things back, you mulligan hard for Orcus. You're going to find him. And yeah, I think this deck is really powerful now. I think it's a really, really solid tier 2, towards the top of tier 2 deck. Okay, so when it comes to Sword, I'm going to share Spicy's version. He is one of the Pro League players, but also this particular version he did just very recently. I think it was yesterday. He just did got a 10 win streak at sort of Grandmaster 3, like really high ranking. And yeah, it's a really good deck. I like the one-off tablet. I think there's a question when you run tablet of whether you run 2 tentacles or whether you run 1 tentacle, one is it Minotaur? Because obviously you're going to lose the tentacles, right, when you do the tablet. But look, Spicy's is one of the top players in the game, so this has served him really well. And this is the exact version card for card that he's got. You can play out a very nice early curve. I actually do like the fact that we finally dropped is it the Lance Trooper and put a couple of Prims in. I think Prim is just a better 2-drop for this type of deck. I don't think Lance Trooper has any good synergy, and I was feeling like it was the weakest card in the deck, to be honest. Yeah, this deck's very, very powerful. So many combos. Obviously, getting Octrice down early is nice. Just thinking about your management with your loot is really important with this deck as well. Always knowing like which 2 of the 4 treasures have you got, which 2 do you need. Using things like Lair of Usurpation, like flexibility for you to get the 2 that you need, and have that choice is massive. And obviously, you really want to get that Sincera in hand or returning Slash to be able to kind of manage things a little bit with the loot. And then you've got your big bombs in your Zirconia. You can still play Volts down on 6 and hide and Evo and then push damage. And then obviously you've got your finishers in your Albert or Sincera going off, and even Ravening Tentacles when you've lost the board but you've got them so low, and then the Tentacles just come in and win you the game. Really powerful deck. Tiny bit inconsistent, but I think the way he's built that makes it more consistent. Modibus really hasn't changed since last week, so exactly the same thing. Got this lovely combo in here where we can play Leah, we can bring her back with the Chaos Cyclone, we can use things like Reaper's Deathflash on the Leah, or we can use Reapers when we Super Evo on something. And obviously we've got the Screaming and Loathing in there, right, to get the extra thinning from the deck, using the mode to draw another version of Screaming and Loathing, because it's the only 3-cost spell that we've got, and deal 4 damage to clear the board, and then drawing a follower when we need, or at a pinch getting a play point back. Really flexible card, really nice. Castle of Entwining early on, just playing this down, getting 1 mode, and then next turn or playing an extra point to engage and getting another mode. 2 for 2. It's just brilliant. It just really speeds up getting Shamnatcha's ability off. As I say, you've got to get 10, haven't you, before you can do that. And once you've triggered Shamnatcha, this deck goes into overdrive, right? The congruents get massive. The Jinsetsu being able to destroy 4 units and heal, whilst at the same time deploying 4 copies of One-Tailed Fox. That's just like game changing. So yeah, it's a really cool deck. And like I said, I think this is at the very top of tier 2. So for tier 1, I'm actually going to share with you a version of Spell Boost that's a bit different, just because you're probably seeing this like every single week. And actually, I picked this up from a guy who I liked what he said, because I experienced this too, where he basically said that he'd lost some key games that he just couldn't draw Kakaitis. Like he was drawing hard for it, he just couldn't draw it. So he ended up putting 2 in. And what I've dropped here is the Snowman Army, which I've never loved that card anyway. Put the second Kakaitis in and just gone for a more consistent wink on there. You can play that wink on, you can play the Q1, the giant Q1 where you play all your demonic calls, and then your Q1, or maybe even a second Q1 after declimb to do massive storm damage. They're your main 2 win-cons, really. Sometimes you get just like a kind of like chip, or a Norman goes down and they just can't answer the board and Norman can win. So there are other ways of winning, but the Q1 or the Kakaitis are the big one. So I've put the second Kakaitis in, dropped the Snowman Army. The other thing that is a card that I really do love, I'm a massive fan of, is Flames of Chaos. I really like this card. I just think, like, it's not like a standard AoE that only does 2 damage to everything. It can deal with ambush units, and it can get ridiculous. I've got some matches where this had like 22 damage, and it's just a board clear for only 3 as well. Like, so much cheaper than a William. And I always felt uncomfortable with Spell Boost when we dropped William, but I think this card is the answer. So I really like this card. I'd even be tempted to have a second one, to be honest. But as we've got the double Kakaitis, we've gone back to 3 Foresights as well. So we're just really going for a much more consistent and leaner kind of game plan. And yeah, it's been working pretty well, to be honest. I'm climbing quite nicely with this. So that's a slight twist on the Spell Boost, because I know you're probably sick of seeing the exact same deck every single week. And last but not least, we've got Crest Haven. Now, if you watched my most recent video on the best deck in the game, definitely go and watch that, because I do quite an in-depth guide. I don't get to play like as much as a lot of the top players, and it's frustrating because, you know, real life stuff. But I did actually just try to dedicate a few days of just like sitting down with this deck and putting a decent number of games together. And yeah, I went something like 19-3, I think. I think I had a 9-game win streak in there, and yeah, hit epic and got up to my Grandmaster 1 and stuff just during that play session. And I learned quite a lot, actually, you know, how to win the mirror match almost every time, and what to do against the other key meta decks. So definitely go and watch that video if you've not had a chance to see it. It's called The Best Decks. Go and watch that. But my version, I do actually run a copy of Himika, even though I don't love this card. I actually think it's a bit anti-synergy, but it just gives you, I think, consistency in being able to build crests out, having that extra crest. I think I'd recommend that to people who are especially just picking the deck up. I think once you've like fully mastered it, then you could definitely drop Himika and maybe put a second Jean in. I think that would be good. Some people go with a second Temple of Rose. Some people go with a third Pact of the Beast Princess. But I think if I was dropping Himika, I'd probably put a second Jean in. But overall, I think this deck is just phenomenal. You're playing down your Marwyn, obviously, and then every single turn, if you don't attack, you're doing a lot of damage from, well, you're doing equal damage to the number of crests that you've got. And the idea is that you fill your crests up to 5, and then you just don't attack, and you just deal 5 damage every single turn. And you've got things like Shining Disenchantment. Once it's turn 10, Giln Elise can give you the Sweetness, is it Sweetness of Veracity? That's it. And it does an extra 5 damage. It's just super powerful. And I quite like the Pact of the Beast. I think in the early game, this in particular is really, really important just to help out against those pretty fast aggro decks, beatdown decks. Pact just kind of is a great equalizer. It's one of Haven's best anti-tempo cards. So a couple of those in has really shored up the gap in the early game. And yeah, it's just super powerful, guys. It's just bonkers. With the Wilbert, with the Marwyn, and with the Grimnir, you've got 3 permanent crests. That means there's only 2 slots that you need to fill. Yeah, it's pretty easy to do. So that is my tier 1 deck that I'm sharing with you guys, and that is the meta. Let me know in the comments what you think to this layout this week with separating crest out and spell boost as the only tier 1s. I'm keen to hear what the community thinks on that. But for me personally, I've been back and forth, and I do think they are a cut above. So let me know in the comments what you think. If there's anything you think I've missed, or any other insights you want to add and build so that other people can benefit, that'd be great. Always appreciate it. And thanks for all the support, guys, as always. I will see you in the next one. If you enjoyed this, go and check out this or one of the guides to the decks that we've discussed today. Ciao for now.